Hello everyone and welcome to this week's Adobe extensions tutorial. In this one I'm going to be showing you how to make a search bar inside of your extension whose basically purpose is to be able to filter or search through elements. So I can type in a word and it's only going to display, in this case, these scripts which I've loaded into the UI with the name I type in. And this can be used to sort elements, to do anything really inside of your extension. Before we get started with this video, I do want to remind you down below, hit subscribe and the bell icon to be notified of new videos coming out twice weekly on the channel. And down in the description, you can check out the extension testing code to get the bare bones extension to follow along with this tutorial and learn all the little extra steps required to make this work. You can download that again in the GitHub link in the description. Also follow us there for coding updates, and in the description follow us on Instagram for other live updates. If you're not a member of the Discord server, you can come and join and help with scripting, extensions, plugins, expressions, submit tutorial ideas, and hang out with members. Shout out to Elad, Ferris Tavelli, and Jay Pearl, three of our VIPs who are often in here contributing and doing really cool stuff, especially with plugins. And if you'd like to help support the channel and become a member, including Discord status as you just saw, you can become a member, supporter, premium supporter, or VIP. The link for that in the description. Alright, so let's go ahead and strip out all the code, and we're going to code this from scratch. I'm going to get rid of everything in my JavaScript here except for my getOS function, and then I'll remove this div and this search bar, and then there's only one function inside of our JSX which we need to worry about. So now if I go ahead and relaunch this, we just have a blank extension testing, which is sort of the bare bones extension testing you can download in GitHub below. So first thing we need to do, we need to add a search bar, and we need to add an area. In this case, we're going to load up a folder full of scripts, and we want to be able to filter those scripts by name. Let's say we have thousands or hundreds of scripts, and we want to easily find some with specific names. So the first thing we're going to do, inside of our HTML, our index.html, inside of our main body, we're going to add a text input. So we'll create an input tag. The type is going to be a text input, and then we can set the value to be something, but by default, let's make it empty. So then we can just, I believe, close it out like that. Then we also want to create a div to put all of the script names inside of. So let's just make a div, we'll call it names div. And inside of here, we're going to auto-generate just a list of divs with the inner HTML of all the script names. So now that we have this, this shouldn't look too fancy, I don't believe. You can see we just have this search bar here, and we have an invisible div below. Let's go ahead and load up the CSS file. I have some names here already, so I'm going to use, for the input, the ID I'm going to set to search bar, and names holder was actually the name I used, not names div, so I'll just change the CSS to names div. This is just a custom setup here. I increased the width of our search bar to 220 pixels, and for the names div, I just gave it a little bit of padding on top, made sure it was 100% width of the extension, and allowed for scrolling. And then we can also, we're going to add a class called name text for each of our script names. Let's go ahead and get all of those script names. We're now going to go into our JavaScript section of our HTML file. You can of course also do this in the JS file itself. I'm just going to keep everything here in one window so we can see it. We're going to create a function called init. I like to set up an init function, which is sort of the first thing that launches when you open up the script. In this case, what we want to do is get all of the names of our script files. In my case, in my videos folder, I have a JSX's folder with a whole bunch of scripts, and those are the ones I'm going to use. So let's go ahead and inside of our init, first we want to grab the names div, which is where we want to put all of our script names. And we also want to get a CS interface so we can run a script and get all those file names. So I'll say CS interface is equal to a new CS interface, and that's so we can interact with the script. We're gonna say CS interface dot eval script get script names, and the second function of this eval script is the callback. we're going to get some results back, which is what res stands for. And this is going to be an array of all of the names of these files. So then what we're going to do is say, create a function called generate names, and we're going to give it json.parse our res. We're going to say json.parse because inside of our JSX file, we're going to stringify the entire array full of all these names. And in order to make that back into an array object, we're just going to parse it. Stringify it converts it into a string, which is good for writing to files and things. Parsing it sort of turns it back into whatever its primary variable type was, whether it's an object, an int, an array, etc. So we're going to parse our results and generate names. So then we need to say function generate names with our names array. And we need to create a div for each one of these. So I'll create a variable called names div. I guess we already have that. We'll say this name div is equal to something. We actually need to get this names div first so we can append it into it. So we'll say var names div is equal to document.get element by ID, element called names div. And now we're going to loop through our names array. Pretty simple stuff here. We're going to say var I is equal to 0, I is less than our names array dot length, increment I by 1. That's going to loop us through the names array. I'm going to move this variable declaration up here. And each time through for each of our names, we're going to create a new name, this name div. So I'll say this name div is equal to document.create element. We're going to create a div element. Then we're going to say this name div dot inner HTML. What's going to display inside of our div? It's going to be names array I, the current name that we get back from that. Then lastly, if you remember, we have a class called nameText. This is just setting the font size, but it's going to allow us to do it for each of these. So to set an attribute, we'll say this name div dot set attribute. The attribute we want to set is the class, and we're going to call it nameText. Now lastly, to create this or sort of add it, we're going to grab our names div, the outer div of all of it, and say append child. Child we want to append is this name div. So that's going to generate our names, but we need to now get all these script names inside of our JavaScript extended file. So inside of our JSX file here, we just have our JSON and then an OS check function. We're going to create another function called whatever we named this, get script names. And we're going to create a variable called simply enough script names. And what we're going to end up returning after all this processing is what I mentioned. We're going to say json.stringify our script names array. If we were to send this script names back without stringifying it, we may get some kind of data error. So it's important we sort of package it up and then unpackage it using json.parse to make sure we get the data correctly. Now, as a reminder, we have this folder here, which we've predetermined. If you wanted to, you could maybe send in, say, a path variable. But in this case, we know what script folder we want to read everything from. So what we're going to do is just say var script folder is equal to a folder with this path. And then we're going to say temp files, because we could have more than just script files. We're going to assume there's a whole bunch of different kind of files. So we'll say script folder.get files. That's going to return all of the files in this folder, including this other folder here. And now we want to sort everything that's a JSX file. So I'll say for var s for script is equal to 0. S is less than our temp files.length s++. If our current temp files name .index of .jsx does not equal -1, basically, if the name of this current file has .jsx in it, if the index was -1, then that means it doesn't exist. It's not in any of the positive integer indexes or indices of the name. If it is greater than -1 or it is not -1, that means it exists. So if that's the case, script names.push temp files s.name, and that's going to give us a full array of all of our script files. Now we haven't really run this to see if it works yet. Let's go ahead and save it and launch it. You can see we are not getting anything. That's because we're not actually running init. We need to call init. And one other thing we might do is use a set timeout just to give it a little bit of a rest first. So I'll say set timeout. We'll just have an anonymous function here. And we're gonna wait half a second before we run init. So in this case, nothing yet. Let's see where we have gone wrong here. Inside of our JSX, let's say script names. We'll alert the script names. See if we're getting that far. It appears to be empty. Let's alert our temp files. Also empty. I think what we need to do here is change up the slashes. I'm going to change this from, I believe that's a / to a \, and that should give us the right path. Let's see if we get proper script names now. Yes. And now these are all going to load in. You can see we have a whole bunch of weird errors here. That's because we need to replace $20 with a space. So now that we know that it's working, we're going to, instead of just pushing the normal name, we're going to replace $20 globally with a space. Now if we run this, we can get just the normal looking names. This is sort of how the appearance of the extension looked when we started. Now all that's left to do is apply the sort or filtering feature. So whenever we type something in, it's going to remove all the elements we don't need and just keep the ones that match our search term. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to add an event listener to our search bar. We want to say anytime they press a key, we want to update our search function. So I'm going to use the event listener called onKeyUp. There's also onKeyDown, which is when you physically push it down, but I want to initiate my search when they release the key that they just pressed. So I'm going to say onKeyUp, and I'll set this equal to, we'll just call this search. I'm going to call this search filter, and I'm going to provide it with this so I can send my input text and get whatever value is they have typed in here. So I'm going to create a function now called search filter, and we're going to have our input element as the argument. Let's go ahead and alert our input element dot value, and this is should give us whatever we have typed in. So if I run this and say A, you can see we're going to get A. If I type in D, we're going to get AD, and this is good because this is now giving us an easy access to our search string. So let's create a variable called search string and set that equal to our input element dot value. And now let's go ahead and go the next step down and take this search string and filter out everything that is not that. So I'm going to create a function called remove names that aren't. Not the best name, but we're going to give it search string, and then we'll define this function, remove names that aren't. We'll just say string, and we want to now remove all of these, what are they called? Name text elements that don't contain our string. First, we're going to get a variable full of all of our name text elements. We need to get all these, which is super easy. We'll just say if our elements is equal to document.getElements by class name, and the class name is name text. Now we'll loop through all of these elements, and we don't want to do a normal loop where we start from 0 and go up to the length -1. We're going to start at the top and head backwards because we're going to be removing things. If you remove element 1, then element 2 then shifts to element 1, and that causes an issue. So anytime you're removing things from an array, always start from the end of it and go towards the front. So I'll say var e for elements, I guess, is equal to elements.length -1. E is greater than or equal to 0. E minus minus. Now let's say we wanted to remove every element just off the bat. How would we do that? We would say elements e dot parent node dot remove child elements e. We always need the parent node and we have to use remove child. So we're just going to get the parent node of whatever the element is and remove the child, which is itself already kind of defined here. So if I was to run this, it's going to start off with all my things, and once I hit a button, they should all be removed. But we of course don't want to necessarily remove everything. We only want to remove things that don't contain our search string. So let's say if elements e dot inner HTML dot index of our search string is equal to -1. If we find that our current element, the inner HTML or the actual display, does not contain our search string, then remove it. So now if we just go ahead and type in batch, it's removing everything, it appears. We just type in one letter, still removing everything. In the original example, I converted everything to lowercase, so let's try that. Say inner HTML dot to lowercase dot index of string dot to lowercase. And sometimes it's best to compare things with just lowercase or uppercase. So now if I type in B, you can see now we're just getting the elements which contain a B. But now if I go back to nothing, everything is messed up here. So we need to reload everything if this is empty. So what we're going to do is say if string is equal to empty, or if string is equal to just a space, let's rerun init. So now if I type in, say, B, I'm going to get these couple of elements, but if I go back here, it's just going to just load everything back up. Type in batch, you can see it's going to load that a few times, remove that, and it goes back to that. Actually, it looks like we have a bug here where it's continually adding those same elements. In the original example, I also put in the same if statement to remove all of the things if it's empty. So let's try this. If I insert this code here, we're just basically saying if the string is empty or a space, remove all the elements. Otherwise, just remove the ones that don't match. So if I save that and rerun it, type in batch, good. Type in batch again, and it's still doing this strange additive thing here. If the string is empty like it is now, it should remove all the elements, but it's keeping here the first couple. Let me just save it again and try this. Batch, and now it's not loading it appropriately. There we go. So there we have batch, and it seems to be having problems updating it here. The error here is that I'm using I instead of E as my index. So now if we run this, type in batch, and we get our batch scripts. If I remove it, it's going to load everything back up, and now we should be able to avoid having this continually loading error. So now if it's empty, it's going to load up all the elements. If we start typing in maybe InDesign, we can get all of our InDesign scripts, and then you can start adding functionality like being able to launch these and things like that. So just as a recap, what we're doing is we're simply grabbing all of the names of these files from a predefined folder. With our JavaScript extended, we're returning that and generating this whole list of divs here. Then using the search bar, we're going to say if our search bar is empty, we're just going to generate all the file names. But if they press a key, we then want to filter by whatever they have typed into this text box, and then we can only display the search sort of featured filtered elements. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, hit the thumbs up button down below, hit subscribe and the bell icon to be notified of new videos coming out twice weekly on the channel. And down in the description, you can check out the extension testing code for this in the GitHub link. Make sure you follow us there for coding updates, and in the description, follow us on Instagram for other live updates. If you're not a member of the Discord server, you can come and join and get help with scripting, extensions, plugins, expressions, and much more. And if you'd like to become a channel member, supporter, premium supporter, or VIP and help the channel out financially and get cool perks at the same time, link for that is in the description. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.